Welcome back to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast, the podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we got a couple of things to get into coming off of the Orlando Magic's narrow win over the Brooklyn Nets. But before we get into that, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers and trying to become one of the biggest Orlando Magic podcasts here on the YouTube platform. So remember to hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And thank you to the sponsor of the podcast, Underdog Fantasy. Again, shout out to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this podcast. With that being said, let's go ahead and get right into it and talk about the overtime victory over the Brooklyn Nets, 104 to 103. And don't get me wrong, this is not how you want to get back in the win column. This Orlando Magic team was up by as much as 18 points. They won the points in the paint battle 54 to 32. They won the offensive glass 20 to 14. Both teams shot absolutely horrid from beyond the arc. 27% for the Orlando Magic, 33% for the Brooklyn Nets. And this was a game that the Orlando Magic just should have won outright, quite frankly. But as the good old coin phrase says, a win is a win, right? And for an Orlando Magic team who seems to not be able to put two games back to back, history has told us that coming off of the most recent loss, in the fashion that they did to the Washington Wizards at that this was going to be a bounce back victory for the Orlando Magic. Was it of the flavor that many Orlando Magic fans would have wanted and expected coming into a game against a Brooklyn Nets team that clearly is trying to get a top 3 pick, that clearly is in the same tier as the Indiana Pacers and the Washington Wizards, who they just split with over the last 2 games? Yes. I would also say that this is a game where Jamal Mosley kind of positioned the Orlando Magic to just have to figure it out. And we'll talk about that a little bit later because I want to talk about something that Jamal Mosley did last game. I think I mentioned it pretty thoroughly last game, focusing on the use of the all-bench unit to help lead what was a potential full-blown 26-point comeback. And how that, in contrast to what took place in this game, may have not only saved his job, but in a weird way may have flipped the entire trajectory of this season. More on that a little later. Paolo Banchero. Game-winning bucket from beyond the arc. No foot on the line. For those who understand that joke against Brooklyn. No foot on the line. Knocks down a big-time 3 in overtime to steal the victory. In a game where, shout out to rookie Yegor Demon, this game could have been lost in regulation. This game could have been lost in regulation. And in OT, Yegor Demon positioned the Brooklyn Nets 2 different times with 2 big-time threes to take this game back. Now the Orlando Magic, I looked it up. This is the 5th game winner that this team has had this season. 4th of Paolo Banchero's career. Paolo finishes the game with 30 points, 14 rebounds. Hilarious that I bet him for the over 9.5 a few days recently. And that wager now is expired. Would have been nice to double down on it in this game where he has the double-double. Also 6 assists, 11 of 19 from the field, 7 of 8 from the free throw line, 1 of 4 from 3. So mind you, the big 3 was the only 3 he hit. Now, 9 turnovers. That's going to be one of those things. Some other notable players in this game: 14 points from Tristan da Silva, 20 points from Wendell Carter Jr., Anthony Black, another quiet night, only 2 of 11 from the field. Desmond Bane, also very quiet in this game. 9, 3 and 3, 4 of 14 from the field, 1 of 6 from beyond the arc. Anthony Black, Wendell Carter, and Desmond Bane combined to go 2 of 14 from 3. 2 of 14 from 3. I did not mention this at the top. Jace Richardson did not play with what was mentioned as an ankle injury coming into the game. So that was something that had to be monitored as well. But Paulo Banchero played that is a game high 42 points. 42 minutes. Next closest to him was Wendell Carter Jr. with 39 and Michael Porter Jr. with 38. Michael Porter Jr., by the way, finished with 34 points, 5 rebounds, 12 of 24 from the field, 8 of 18 from beyond the arc. Yegor Dimon had 18, 5, and 5, knocked down 5 threes of his own. So those two alone completely outshot the Orlando Magic starting 5 from beyond the arc. Cam Thomas came off the bench, only 10 points, 5 rebounds, very calm, 3 of 11 from him, nothing too special. But Paulo Banchero, not only was this like a game that he needed to have, just like for momentum's sake, but like this was a game that we needed to see from him just to continue the wave of reminding people that like this dude is an all-star. And I know some will say, well, Jay, he had 28 against Indiana. He had 31 against Chicago. He had 29 in the first matchup against Indiana. Like, he's been balling like this. Exactly. But games like 24 minutes, 14 points, 4 rebounds against the Washington Wizards, where your bench unit has a better chance of getting you back in the game after being down by as much as 26 points, it'll make you doubt that sometimes. This was a game that the Orlando Magic desperately needed out of Paulo Banchero. I think it's very easy to overreact when it comes to this Orlando Magic team because of the ebbs and flows that have come with the way this season has been. But I think the reality of the situation is something that I think is just going to be very important to take in mind throughout the entirety of the year, is going to be that this team knows who their alpha is. I think this team knows who their omega and then some is. The problem that this team is struggling with is not necessarily a pecking order issue. It's all built around philosophy. And the philosophical issue for this team is that when they do not control the offensive and defensive glass, aka represent physicality on both ends of the floor, they're not themselves. They're not themselves when they're hungry. You're not yourself when you're hungry, right? I would actually say the opposite for the Orlando Magic. They're not themselves because they're not hungry. Games like this, and again, I'll talk about this a little bit more in depth in the Jamal Mosley section, but games like this show, particularly from this starting 5, that when they really want it, even on a bad night, when they really want it, they can make the key plays necessary in order to win the game. Now, again, this game was too close for comfort. We all can agree on that. But this was also one of those you gotta show me some heart games. This was one of those you gotta show me some heart game. And they did that. It was a big shot by Paulo Banchero. I think a lot of people would think in a win, what's the best way to phrase this? In a scenario where you need a game-winning shot and it needs to be a beyond-the-arc bucket in order to be able to send that team home, I think many would say Paulo Banchero is maybe the second or third option when you think of that. Just thinking of the landscape of the team right now. Anthony Black, when he's been playing at his best, has been a 38% three-point shooter so far this season. Desmond Bane, we've seen prove 2 times this season already that he can make big-time shots from beyond the arc in those kind of high-leverage moments. despite Paulo Banchero being the best player on the team from a talent perspective, you could see an ideology where someone else would be the guy to take that shot. I think it matters that Paulo was the one who made the shot. I think it matters that he's done this twice within the last week. I think it matters that right after Jalon says, I think that Franz Wagner is your closer in big moments as far as big shot taker, big shot maker archetypes are concerned, maybe Paulo is not that guy. Paulo might get you through the first 3.5 quarters, but Franz is the guy you're going to trust with the ball in his hands in the closing 2 minutes to help get you to the promised land. That's what Jay said. And I don't find it both a coincidence nor ironic. I find it simply as a straightforward tale that says Paulo Banchero truly is better than even most give him credit for, including myself. And it just takes performances like this one, high leverage moments like this one, to prove it. People will still feel a way about Paulo Banchero after a game like this, and deservedly so. He is not the easiest superstar to build around. He is not the most ideal number one option in certain situations. But the dude is an insane basketball player. And games like these, gotta have it. Games against underwhelming opponents where you just cannot afford to lose back-to-back games against under 500 ball clubs. Again, it wasn't pretty, but a win is a win. A win is a win. Fast breaks, buzzer beaters, and block parties are back, and Underdog is the best place to get in on all the action. Playing on Underdog is easy. Just pick whether your favorite players will go higher or lower on stats like points, rebounds, steals, and more. Get your picks right, and you could win up to 5,000 times your cash. This week on Underdog, I'm looking at, come on, man, the NBA as usual. Today, we're looking at two games in particular that stood out to me. Number one, we got to talk about the Timberwolves versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'm going to go with Anthony Edwards higher than 29.5 points. And then we're going to look at that Miami Heat versus Chicago Bulls game on the road for the Miami Heat. I'm going to go lower than 20.5 points for Tyler Hero. Again, that's higher than 29.5 points for Anthony Edwards against the Cavaliers, and lower than 20.5 points for Tyler Hero in the Miami Heat's game against the Chicago Bulls. Yeah, I'm hating on the Miami Heat as a Orlando Magic supporter should. Also, Bulls fan, come on now, not scoring more than 20 points. With that all being said, remember to use promo code BASKETBALLFAN to score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. That's promo code BASKETBALLFAN. Underdog, make picks, win money. Place the entry, man. I'm telling y'all, place the entry. I feel pretty confident in this one. I know I said that last time. Just trust in you, boy. Next up, we got to talk about my boy Noah Penda. He's making it hard for Jamal Mosley not to play him. 31 minutes, 13 points, 11 rebounds. I know he was 5 of 15 from the floor. He took 15 shots, which was second most on the team. On the offensive glass, led the team, was second on the team with 5 offensive rebounds. Goga Bitadze off the bench also had a big rebounding night. 8 offensive rebounds, 10 rebounds in total. And again, that goes back to what I was saying about the Orlando Magic's identity in the trenches, winning the offensive and defensive glass, getting What's that? 13 offensive rebounds from 2 players, both off the bench, mind you. 13 of their 20 offensive rebounds came from 2 players off the bench. Say what you want. I said it at the start of the year. I said, if Noah Pinda gets the opportunity, he is going to show early and often why the Orlando Magic shall phase Jonathan Isaac out of the rotation entirely. Jonathan Isaac, for those who are wondering, DMP, CD. In my eyes, DMP CD. Because why? 10 minutes, 1 rebound, 1 shot. Absolutely non-existent. Absolutely non-existent in this 10 minutes on the floor. Now, there were some defensive possessions and things of that nature. I'm being facetious. I'm obviously joking. It wasn't like Jonathan Isaac just wasn't there. It's just that he didn't show very much of an impact on the offensive defensive glass. And as far as like blocking shots and things of that nature, he did not have any blocks, any steals. Unfortunately, I can't check deflections right now, but compared to Noah Pinda, night and day in terms of offensive aggressiveness, attacking the boards, scoring in transition. All 3 things that Noah Pinda showed in high favor in this game. These rookies are not wasting time trying to prove that they are worthy of being a part of an 8 to 9 man rotation when we're looking ahead to something like the postseason. This team is ready. This team is ready, and the rookies are ready. Noah Pinda, to me, Noah Pinda is the diamond in the rough, in my personal opinion, of this entire class as a early second round pick that I think, honestly, if I'm being real with you, on a handful of these other bad teams, could probably start at either small forward or power forward, truthfully. Do I think that Noah Pinda could be a starter on the Brooklyn Nets? Yes. Do I think that Noah Pinda could be a starter on the Washington Wizards right now? Yes. Do I think he could be a starter on the Charlotte Hornets at the 4 spot? I do. Like, there's a handful of NBA teams right now that I think if you could plop Noah Pinda in at the 4 or the small ball 5, he would be a starter on that team right now. Is that blind faith? Is that hyperbole by a person who was high on Noah Pinda coming into the draft and being just further validated by the fact that a team that I cover on a daily basis drafted him, and now I see him night in and night out, even if it's in minimal, spurts here and there up until most recently? Yes. But I also genuinely think that this is a guy that Jamal Mosley's just not going to be able to hold back very much longer. I'm not saying that he's going to be a starter. Not on this team, unfortunately. But this is a guy that I've been campaigning to see more minutes for since the very start of the season. And I mean, if the guy's going to play, let me go to his game log. If the guy is going to play in games where every time he plays at least 20 minutes, he's had, outside of 1 game this season, outside of 2 games this season, every time he has played 20 or more minutes, which is 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, hilariously enough. So 5 of the 7 games that he has played 20 or more minutes, he has finished the game in double figures. And in a majority of those games, 2 to be exact, he had a double-double. The other 2, he had 9 rebounds and 8 rebounds. I'm saying all this to say that when Noah Pinda sees 20 or more minutes, he's dang near a walking double-double. That guy needs to play more. That guy needs to play more. I mean, there's no other way of putting it. If the guy is averaging nearly a double-double in games where he plays 20 or more minutes, that's a guy who needs to see more minutes. That might be some of the weakest analysis I've ever given on this podcast as far as like just very basic A to B, but it really truly is that simple. Now, how does that factor in when Franz comes back, Jalen Suggs comes back, if that's how things end up shuffling out? Because, of course, we've discussed on the podcast on a multitude of episodes how he could potentially be packaged in a trade deal, which might not happen anymore because the trade that we talked about involved him being in the Trae Young trade and involving CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert. And guess what? Those guys ended up going to the Atlanta Hawks. Noah Penna needs to play more. I don't know how it's going to factor in when Franz Wagner and Desmond and Jalen Suggs come back. I don't know how it's going to factor when Mo Wagner comes back. I don't know how it all makes sense. What I know is Noah Penna needs to play more. He's making it harder and harder for Jamal Mosley to look at his production when he has real time on the floor and how successful he is when he has real time on the floor to deny him any further. I think Jamal Mosley should play him more. You guys let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about it, though. Last but not least, speaking of Jamal Mosley, and I teased this towards the top of the episode, I'm going to finally conclude the episode with this thought point. Jamal Mosley made a very controversial decision to go with an all-bench lineup of Tyus Jones, Jet Howard, Jace Richardson, Noah Pinda, and Goga Batazde to help the Orlando Magic surge back in what eventually still ended up being a loss to the Washington Wizards. I went on an entire tirade about how much more he trusted the bench to just fight. And they did fight in ways that the starting five simply did not, could not, will not. And I don't know if that was a representation of quitting on the coach. I don't know if there was just an overall disconnect across the board for the starting five. I'm not sure. But in this game, he reversed psychology. He played a little bit of reverse psychology. Yes, you were without Jace Richardson in this game in comparison to against the game against the Wizards. But the reverse psychology was that in this game, he leaned as far into the starting five as he possibly could. Paolo Banchero, 42 minutes. Wendell Carter Jr., 39 minutes. Anthony Black, 37 minutes. Desmond Bane, 35 minutes. Noah Pinda didn't start. He played 31. He made up for the fact that Tristan Da Silva played 23. I think that just had a lot more to do with the fact that Noah Pinda just gave them something a little bit more than what Tristan was giving them, especially on the offensive glass. 4 of your starters played 35 minutes or more. After playing, what was that? No more than 27 per player in the game prior. I'll double check that just to make certain. Excuse me, overshot. No starter played more than 24 minutes in the loss against the Washington Wizards. In this game, 4 of your starters played no less than 35 minutes. The reverse psychology was, in this game, I'm going to show you how much the bench wants it more than you do. And in this game against the Brooklyn Nets, Jamal Mosley said, now it's your turn to figure it out. Now it's your turn to show me, to show us, to show the Orlando Magic fans how bad do you want it. Because in the game before, the bench showed us that when they won it, they could nearly drive us back to a near 26-point comeback. So how much heart do you have as the starting five? How much heart do you have as the starters in a gotta have it game to not drop two in a row against under 500 teams, to not lose a narrow victory against a team that you had an 18-point lead against? Jamal Mosley says, you lost the lead, you figure out how to get it back and keep it. It took heroics towards the end. Big Wendell Carter Jr. dunk down the stretch. Obviously, the Paolo Banchero game winner. But the premise is that I think Jamal Mosley may have pulled a rabbit out of his hat we didn't even know he was capable of leaning into. Because he played a psychological game with his team by forcing them to have to look in the mirror. And I think it makes it even better that these games were back-to-back, because this is fresh in their mind that yesterday, being in this case, I'm referring to Tuesday, you watched your coach tell you blatantly that if you don't have the heart to play, to fight, to get us back in this, I'm going to play someone who does. And in that case, it was the entire starting five that seemed to not have enough heart to prove that Mosley could put them back on the floor. In this game, Mosley took that and now said, now show me what you've learned. Show me what you took away from that feeling. Show me what you took away from being in a position like that one, where we had to question your fight. I don't love coming onto this podcast and telling people about how I feel like the Orlando Magic are softening up with all these injuries and how it feels like they don't have the same edge and fight that they once had earlier on in the year. But the reality of this situation is that this is a team that desperately needed to find a way to get their edge back. They showed a little bit of it on the offensive and defensive glass, I've mentioned constantly throughout the podcast. But another thing that they showed it through was their ability to continue to just fight. Again, I mentioned it. 4 of the 5 starters played 35 or more minutes, coming off of a game where none played more than 24. This was you need to figure out what you want. You need to figure out who you are kind of statement by Jamal Mosley. There's not too many coaches, I think, that are bold enough to pull at the heartstrings of a franchise player like Paolo Banchero, a tone setter like Desmond Bane, who came to the franchise thinking that he was going to be the missing piece to help put them over the top as a team that already was making real noise as a perennial postseason kind of team. But adding him to the mix was supposed to make them a team you have to genuinely worry about going the distance in the Eastern Conference playoffs. It would be tough to pull at the heartstrings of a player like Anthony Black, who, yes, has played relatively poorly over the last 2 games, but prior to that, the prior 7 games, the man was averaging 24 points a game and shooting over 40% from beyond the arc in that time frame. So it's hard to look at the idea of him pulling at the heartstrings of those guys by sitting them and forcing them to have to dwell in that, only to throw them into the fire the very next game, the very next day. But Jamal Mosley did that, and I commend him for that. Because I have a crazy feeling that move, paired with getting Franz Wagner back, getting Mo Wagner back very, very soon, is going to lead to this peak the Orlando Magic eventually show later on this season, And it's going to reflect a team that, like in a 7-game series against anyone in the Eastern Conference, you may bet against, but you're going to feel very uncomfortable doing so. I know a lot of Orlando Magic fans are not the biggest fans of Jamal Mosley. I know in the early portion of the season, I mentioned that his seat may at least be warm this year. He got brownie points from me in this game. Me personally, he earned brownie points from me. With the way that from one night to the other, the psychological aspect of the moves that he made in the last 2 days may have reignited this team in a way that I think doesn't mean they'll never lose another basketball game. Let's be realistic now, right? But I think it made the right kind of headway as far as making his team realize that sometimes all you have to do is fight. Because when you're that talented, when you have Paolo, Desmond Bane, Anthony Black, Tristan da Silva, Wendell Carter Jr., Noah Penn, when you're that talented with no fight, you're no good. But when you're that talented with a little bit of hunger in you, even in a game you should probably lose, you win. This was a game that when the Brooklyn Nets stormed back and took the lead from a Orlando Magic team that, again, at one point had an 18-point lead. 2 big-time shots in overtime by Yegor Dimon could have stole the game. Brooklyn Nets could have stole this game. And they would have deserved to win the game. But you pair the talent with the hunger, and sometimes you win games that you weren't even supposed to. And that's what the Orlando Magic did in this one. Don't love the way they win sometimes, but as I said at the top of the episode, a win is a win. With all that being said, this has been another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. Again, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. Again, shout out to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the pod. Appreciate that as always. I'll be checking in the comment section to see how you guys feel about some of the things we talked about. Noah Penn, Paolo Banchero, Jamal Mosley, and more. But until next time, I'll see you guys later.